No problem at all.
Okay.
No problem.
Go to the front of the car, right here. Take a seat. So I'm going to explain it one more time. You can give me your driver's license so I can do the crash.
Sir.
I'm going to put you in handcuffs.
You first and foremost. Let's be logical
I'm done
here.
because you keep yelling.
No,
Turn around.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Put me in. Please do. Please do.
The moment the officer pulled up, the tension was already thick in the air. What should have been a routine traffic interaction immediately felt like something else entirely, something volatile. A woman stood outside her vehicle, visibly agitated. Her voice raised before the officer could even fully step into the situation. Without hesitation, she demanded authority, calling for a supervisor before the officer had even explained why he was there. It's often said that the tone of an encounter is set within the first few seconds, and here, the tone wasn't just off, it was spiraling. The officer, calm and measured, tried to ground the situation. He explained that he'd been flagged down by another driver who claimed her vehicle had been hit. Simple enough. But instead of allowing the process to unfold, the woman immediately pushed back, denying everything with intensity, her frustration boiling over into hostility. She insisted there was no damage, no contact, no reason for the stop, and certainly no reason for her time to be wasted. What made the situation more complicated wasn't just her denial, it was her approach. She wasn't simply defending herself. She was escalating. She questioned the legitimacy of the stop, challenged the officer's authority, and repeatedly circled back to her demand for a supervisor. The officer, maintaining composure, tried a different tactic. He calmly explained that if he were to call a supervisor, he needed a valid reason, something specific to justify escalating the situation further. It was a subtle but effective shift, placing the responsibility back on her to articulate a clear issue. But instead of de-escalating, she doubled down, launching into a rapid-fire explanation filled with contradictions, accusations, and visible irritation. Her words came fast, layered with emotion rather than clarity, making it difficult for anyone, officer or bystander, to piece together what had actually happened. Meanwhile, the officer did what professionals are trained to do. He stepped away from the chaos and sought the other side of the story. The second driver, far more composed, explained the situation in detail. According to her, the encounter began on a busy roadway where merging traffic created tension. She described erratic driving, aggressive maneuvers, and eventually a moment where contact was made between the vehicles. Unlike the first woman, her account was structured, supported by context, and even backed by video evidence she had attempted to record during the incident. She spoke of fear, confusion, and the sudden escalation that turned an ordinary drive home into a stressful confrontation. It wasn't just about a minor collision anymore. It was about behavior on the road that could have led to something far worse. Back at the initial point of contact, the first woman's agitation hadn't subsided. If anything, it had intensified. She paced, shouted, and continued to argue her case loudly, her voice cutting through the air as she insisted there was no possible way she could have hit the other vehicle. To her, the logic was simple. No visible damage meant no incident. But what she failed to consider was that not all collisions leave obvious marks, and more importantly, that investigations require time, patience, and cooperation. Instead of giving the officer space to assess the situation, she inserted herself back into the process, raising her voice, dismissing the other driver's claims, and creating an environment that was quickly becoming unmanageable. Then came the turning point. The officer, now having observed both parties and identified what appeared to be fresh paint transfer on the second vehicle, attempted to move forward with the next step, documentation. A crash report needed to be completed, which required basic information from both drivers. It was standard procedure, nothing unusual, nothing personal. But when he asked for her driver's license, the situation took a sharp turn. She refused, not hesitantly, not reluctantly, completely and outright. Her refusal wasn't rooted in confusion. It was defiance. She questioned why her license was needed, dismissed the legitimacy of the report, and continued to demand a supervisor as if it were a shield against compliance. The officer gave her a clear explanation. This wasn't optional. Providing identification in this context was part of the process. Without it, the investigation couldn't proceed. He warned her of the consequences. If she continued to refuse, she would be detained. Even then, she didn't budge. Instead, she challenged him, almost daring him to follow through. And that's exactly what happened. Within moments, what could have been a simple exchange of information escalated into physical detainment. She was asked to step out of the vehicle, and as she did, her resistance didn't fade, it transformed. Her words grew louder, her accusations sharper. She claimed her rights were being violated, that she was being targeted, that the entire situation was unjust. From the outside, it was clear what had happened. This was no longer about a minor traffic incident. It had evolved into something else entirely, a clash between authority and refusal, between procedure and perception. The officer remained composed, repeating instructions, explaining each step, trying to maintain control without escalating further. But the reality was unavoidable. The moment she refused to comply with a lawful request, the trajectory of the situation changed. What could have ended with a simple report was now heading somewhere far more serious. And as the handcuffs came out, the atmosphere shifted again. Not quieter, just heavier. The weight of the situation settled in, not just for those involved, but for anyone watching. This wasn't just about what happened on the road anymore. It was about choices. Split-second decisions fueled by emotion, pride, and frustration. And as those choices unfolded in real time, the outcome became increasingly inevitable. As the handcuffs were secured, the situation didn't calm down. It evolved into something even more chaotic. The woman's voice, already loud, now carried a sharper edge. Fueled by disbelief and anger, she insisted she was being illegally detained, repeatedly claiming that her rights were being violated. To her, this wasn't an investigation anymore. It was, in her words, kidnapping. The officer, still composed, clarified the situation again. She was not under arrest at that exact moment, but she was being detained due to her refusal to provide identification for crash report. It was a distinction that mattered legally, but in her state of mind, it made no difference. She wasn't listening. She was reacting. What stood out in that moment was a complete breakdown in communication. The officer spoke in calm, measured tones, explaining each step, each reason, each consequence. But every attempt to clarify was met with resistance. She talked over him, dismissed his explanations, and doubled down on her belief that she had done nothing wrong. This is where situations like this often spiral. Not because of single action, but because one side refuses to engage with the reality of the situation. From her perspective, compliance felt like surrender. From the officer's perspective, compliance was simply part of the process. As she was guided toward a patrol car, another layer of complexity emerged. The officer took her phone, a move that might seem controversial at first glance, but in context, it made sense. She had been actively using it, speaking to someone on the other end. And in volatile situations like this, outside communication can escalate things further. Who was she talking to? What were they saying? Were they calming her down or encouraging her behavior? Moments later, that question was answered in part when a man arrived on the scene, clearly connected to her. His presence shifted the dynamic immediately. At first glance, he appeared calm, cooperative even. He spoke respectfully to the officers, asked questions, and didn't display the same level of aggression. But beneath that calm exterior, there were subtle signs that told a different story. While the officers were focused on managing the detained woman and completing their investigation, he moved toward her vehicle. What happened next was quick, quiet, and easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. At her direction, he retrieved her purse from the car. On its own, that might not seem unusual, but context is everything. The way she instructed him, low, almost coded, combined with the urgency of his actions, raised questions. He didn't simply grab the purse and hold on to it. Instead, he concealed it inside his own bag. That single action introduced a layer of uncertainty. What was inside that purse? Why did she want it removed before officers could check it? And why was it done in a way that suggested it wasn't meant to be noticed? For the officers, this kind of behavior is a red flag. It's not about assuming guilt. It's about recognizing patterns that could indicate something is being hidden. Meanwhile, the detained woman continued to struggle, not physically in a violent sense, but verbally and emotionally. She complained about the handcuffs, saying they were too tight, Cutting off her circulation, the officers adjusted their approach, even adding a second set of cuffs to give her more space. Something not always done, but in this case, an attempt to accommodate her complaints while maintaining control. Ironically, the added mobility made the situation even more unpredictable, with her arms able to move more freely than usual. There was a visible concern about what she might do next. Despite these adjustments, her frustration only grew. She spoke about humiliation, about being treated unfairly, about how situations like this lead to lawsuits. And in a way, she wasn't entirely wrong. These moments often do end up in courtrooms. But what she couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge was how her own actions contributed to where she now stood. The refusal to comply, the constant escalation, the inability to pause and reassess. It all compounded into this outcome. The officer, now balancing multiple priorities, tried once again to bring clarity. He explained the situation from his perspective. Two conflicting stories, visible evidence suggesting contact between vehicles, and the need to document everything properly. He emphasized that no one was being arrested for the crash itself. That part was crucial. The alleged collision was minor, something that could have been resolved with a simple exchange of information. But everything that happened after, that's what changed the trajectory. Still, she pushed back. She questioned the timeline, the investigation, the logic. She argued that it was impossible to determine a crash in such a short amount of time, ignoring the fact that officers are trained to assess evidence quickly. She pointed out that her vehicle hadn't been inspected thoroughly, using that as justification for her resistance. But again, the issue wasn't whether the investigation was perfect. It was that she refused to participate in it at all. As the scene unfolded, the contrast between the two drivers became even more apparent. One cooperated, provided information, and allowed the process to move forward. The other resisted at every step, turning a routine investigation into a prolonged, high-tension encounter. And in the background, that unanswered question lingered. The purse, the hidden contents, the quiet actions that suggested there might be more to this story than just a traffic dispute. The arrival of additional officers, including what appeared to be a state trooper, added another layer of presence and control to the scene. It wasn't about escalation, it was about safety. With more people involved, more emotions in play, and unpredictable behavior from the detained woman, having additional support was a necessary precaution. And as they coordinated their efforts, one thing became increasingly clear. This situation had moved far beyond its original scope. What started as a simple claim of a minor traffic incident had now turned into a complex, multi-layered event involving resistance, potential evidence concealment, and escalating behavior. And through it all, one theme remained constant: the consequences of how a person chooses to respond in high-pressure moments. Because sometimes it's not the initial event that determines the outcome, it's everything that comes after. As more officers settled into position, and the scene gained structure, the situation finally began to move toward resolution, but not in a way it could have if things had started differently. One of the officers spoke calmly with the man who had arrived, explaining the reality of what was happening. The alleged crash itself was not the reason for the arrest. That part was almost secondary now. The deciding factor, the point of no return, was her refusal to comply with a lawful order. When she declined to provide her driver's license after multiple clear instructions, she crossed a legal threshold. Everything that followed became a consequence of that single decision. The officer laid it out plainly. This was now an obstruction issue. The other party involved in the incident wasn't even interested in pressing charges for collision. They simply wanted a crash report for documentation and insurance purposes. That's it. No dramatic courtroom battle. No criminal charges tied to the accident itself. Just paperwork. But instead of allowing that simple process to happen, the situation escalated into something far more serious. It's one of those moments where the irony is almost hard to ignore. What someone fights the hardest to avoid can sometimes become inevitable because of how they fight it. Meanwhile, the woman, still seated in the back of the patrol car, hadn't let go of her narrative. She continued insisting that she was being wronged, repeating that she had asked for a supervisor and had been denied. In her mind, that request alone should have halted everything. But what she didn't seem to understand, or chose not to accept, was that asking for a supervisor doesn't override an officer's authority to carry out their duties. It doesn't pause an investigation. It doesn't grant immunity from compliance. It simply adds another layer to the process, one that still requires cooperation in the meantime. Her words became more frantic, more emotional, as the reality of the situation began to settle in. She spoke about her rights, about working for the government, about knowing the system. But knowledge, real or perceived, doesn't replace behavior. And in this case, her behavior was the very thing working against her. The officers, despite everything, continued to show restraint. Their tone remained steady, their instructions clear, their actions measured. Even when she accused them of wrongdoing, even when she raised her voice and challenged her decisions, they didn't mirror her energy. They stayed grounded, and that contrast was impossible to ignore. Not far from the patrol car, the man who had arrived earlier was still present, now fully aware of the situation's seriousness. His demeanor, initially calm, now carried a different weight. He wasn't arguing, wasn't escalating, but there was a shift, subtle but noticeable. The earlier moment with the purse lingered in the background, an unresolved detail that added tension beneath the surface. It was one of those quiet elements that didn't explode into something obvious, but still left questions hanging in the air. In situations like this, it's often not just what's seen, it's what's implied. As the officers wrapped up their documentation, they informed him of the next steps. She would be taken in, processed, and likely released on bond within a few hours. A misdemeanor charge, serious, but not life-altering. Still, it was a charge that didn't need to exist. A charge that could have been avoided entirely with a different approach in those first critical moments. He acknowledged the information, asked a few questions, and remained cooperative. Again, the contrast stood out. Two people connected to the same situation, responding in completely different ways, leading to completely different outcomes. Back in the patrol car, the woman's tone shifted again, less aggressive, more strained. The earlier confidence, the defiance, the certainty that she was in control of the situation, it had started to crack. In its place was frustration, exhaustion, and a sense of disbelief. She spoke about humiliation, about being treated unfairly, about how situations like this lead to legal action. And while those feelings were real to her, they were rooted in a version of events that didn't fully align with reality. Because at the end of the day, the officers didn't create the situation, they responded to it. The final moments of the scene were quiet compared to how it began. The other driver was clear to leave, her part in the process complete. She had cooperated, provided information, and allowed the system to do what it was designed to do. No shouting, no resistance, no escalation, just compliance. It's not always easy, especially in stressful situations, but it often makes all the difference. As the patrol car pulled away, lights flashing, one final thought lingered over everything that had just happened. This wasn't a story about a crash. It wasn't even really about who was right or wrong on the road. It was about choices, how quickly things can escalate when emotions take over, how a refusal to engage can turn a minor issue into a major one, and how sometimes the outcome isn't determined by the initial event, but by how people respond to it. Because in the end, this entire situation could have gone a completely different way. A calm conversation, an exchange of information, a signed report. Everyone goes home. Instead, it became a lesson, one that played out in real time, under pressure, with consequences that didn't have to exist. And that's the part that sticks. Not the flashing lights, not the raised voices, but the realization that it all could have been avoided. As a patrol car disappeared down the road, lights flashing against a fading backdrop, what remained wasn't just the aftermath of an arrest. It was a case study in how quickly control can slip away when emotion takes the wheel. For the officers, this was another call, another report, another person taken into custody. But for everyone else involved, especially the woman at the center of it all, this moment would likely linger far longer than the drive to the station. Inside that patrol car, reality tends to hit differently. The noise dies down, the adrenaline fades, and what's left is silence, the kind that forces reflection, whether someone is ready for it or not. Just minutes earlier, she had been standing outside her vehicle, arguing, asserting control, convinced she was in the right. Now, she was restrained, facing charges, and on her way into a system she believed she understood. That shift doesn't happen gradually. It happens all at once. And for many people, it's not the arrest itself that hits hardest, but the realization of how preventable it all was. Back at the scene, the officers continued their routine, wrapping up loose ends of the kind of efficiency that comes from experience. Paperwork, radio updates, coordination with dispatch. It's the less visible side of law enforcement, but just as critical, the energy that once filled the air had dissipated, replaced by a quiet sense of closure. Yet even in that calm, there were lingering questions. The purse, the subtle exchange, the behavior of the man who had arrived. None of it had escalated into something concrete, but it left behind a thread of uncertainty. Sometimes, not every question gets answered on scene. Sometimes, things remain unresolved, sitting just below the surface. What stands out most in situations like this isn't just a legal outcome. It's the psychology behind it. There's a pattern that shows up again and again. A person feels wrong, disrespected, or misunderstood. Instead of slowing down, they push harder. They raise their voice, challenge authority, refuse to cooperate. Not because it helps their case, but because it feels like the only way to maintain control. But in reality, it does the opposite. It hands control over to the very system they're trying to resist. The repeated mention of knowing my rights is another piece of that pattern. It's something you hear often in these encounters. And knowing your rights is important. There's no question about that. But knowing your rights and understanding how to exercise them appropriately are two very different things. Rights don't eliminate responsibilities. They don't override lawful orders. And they certainly don't protect someone from the consequences of refusing to comply in situations where compliance is required. That disconnect is where a lot of these situations go wrong. Then there's the role of ego, something that rarely gets talked about directly, but is almost always present. In high-stress moments, ego can amplify everything. It turns a simple disagreement into a personal battle. It makes backing down feel like losing, even when backing down would actually resolve the situation. And once ego takes over, logic tends to take a backseat. That's when decisions stop being strategic and start being reactive. And reactive decisions, especially in situations involving law enforcement, tend to come with consequences. Contrast that with the other driver, the one who flagged down the officer. Her approach wasn't perfect, but it was controlled. She provided information, answered questions, and allowed the process to play out. She didn't try to dominate the situation or force an outcome. And because of that, her involvement ended the way most people would hope, without escalation, without charges, without being placed in handcuffs on the side of the road. Same situation, different approach, completely different result. And that's really what this comes down to. Not who was right or wrong in the initial incident, but how each person chose to handle what came after. Because the truth is, most people will never find themselves in a situation exactly like this. But they will face moments where emotions run high, where they feel misunderstood, where they're tempted to react instead of respond. And in those moments, the outcome often hinges on a single choice: escalate or de-escalate. It's easy to watch something like this from the outside and think, I would never do that. But pressure has a way of changing people. It narrows focus, amplifies emotion, and makes short-term reactions feel justified in the moment. That's why awareness matters. That's why understanding how quickly things can spiral is so important. Because once that line is crossed, once a situation moves from conversation to confrontation, it becomes much harder to bring it back. In the end, this wasn't just a roadside incident. It was a reminder, clear, unfiltered, and impossible to ignore, that how you handle a situation can matter just as much, if not more, than the situation itself. A minor claim of contact between two vehicles turned into an arrest, not because of the crash, but because of everything that followed. And that's the part that sticks. Not the argument, not the accusations, but the moment where a different choice could have changed everything, and didn't.